Some preliminary thoughts on the feminists who fear pregnancy. This was written in pretty much one sitting with very little, almost no editing, and I fear I've left quite a lot out, and because of that I may yet write a second part. What is scary about childbirth for the modern feminist is that it challenges one of the central tenets of feminism, that of the essential biological equality of men and women, and the mastery of the Western woman over her biological reality or circumstance. There is feminist organising, often radical in nature, which plainly attempts to make itself accessible to mothers and their children, but the organisers of these events do so because it is what they feel they should do. The kinship they feel with mothers is perfunctorily aesthetic in nature. These are women who themselves are unlikely to have children, either because of adherence to feminist orthodoxy, a tumultuous life that lends itself only to near constant agitation, because they are gay, or because they have scared themselves out of an ability to trust men as a class. The childless feminist thus views motherhood obliquely, as some kind of sadly non-negotiable reality. Women will have children, that is their want, yet I shall not. I'm not the type to, or I might like to in that far-off someday that doesn't bear thinking about. It is a certain kind of woman who has children, and I feel sorry for her, but she must be a different kind of species from me. This speaks to an intense alienation from one's body that is necessarily at the core of a feminism that routinely denies biological reality. If it is possible to abrogate the healthy menstrual cycle, then it is possible to maintain the alluring lie of gender neutrality. To concern oneself with more pressing things, whether political or in furthering one's career, whatever it may be that distracts the constant, restless intellectual roving, which belies discontentedness with the lack of deep familial connection as between husband and wife and child. For another essential aspect of this feminism is the denial of the family bond. Reams of paper have been spoiled with tracts on family abolition, often by those who themselves feel shortchanged by the family contract, and solipsistically wish to deny others what they are unable to see and feel for themselves. For it is often the broken who preach family abolition, and yet mothers they profess to welcome and include. So is the maternal instinct to be preserved, and men superfluous to the postmodern vision of radical equality? With mothers sitting so uncomfortably within the vision, I am sceptical. Any movement that denigrates the sanctity of the family is at its heart a solipsistic and, we can say, autistic one. For the abject failure of an individual to consider the strengths and advantages of a family to a child, not chosen, not radically and subversively queered, but biological, denies the findings of decades of research, yes, but also shows the inability to embody another's point of view, indeed the point of view held by the vast majority of the population and of children themselves. The family is the starting point of not only life, but culture, thriving, production, and meaning, blows any radical alternative out of the water, a paper-thin, insufficient, and meagre substitute. But more on the biological alienation experienced by a certain kind of woman. Actually, I believe there are two kinds who are most likely to experience this. The first is easier to identify. Nowadays, there will be obvious misfits, as they are either trans or have or are seeking diagnoses for conditions like autism or ADHD. The second are essentially agreeable, often very typically heterosexual women who, by dint of sexual abuse or some other deep wrong, identify closely with a radical worldview as a route out of the unspeakable pain they feel. Many of the former category experience the same alienation, but where they differ is that the obvious heterosexuals, for the most part, will gradually meet men, and potentially a good man. They will slowly slide out of activism and settle into some normality when they are taught the tenderness a good man is capable of. They begin to heal, so drop like flies from the feminist movement as they slowly rediscover deeper meaning on the other side of pain and growth. The former group of misfits do not get the ease of such a path, whether by dint of evolved nature, terrible childhood experiences during a critical developmental window, bullying for their difference, etc. These are marked out by a shared horror at the notion of womanhood. It is as if a woman, let alone a mother, were of a different species. Now this is similar to, but not to be confused with, the casual and unassuming misogyny of young women who cannot but refer to themselves as girls, their transition to womanhood mired by a fear of aging, of becoming ugly and forgettable. Rather, this is a lack of identification with the entire biological reality of womanhood, the desire to be a brain in a jar, free of the dizzying tides of the menstrual cycle, the sickness of the blood, the ripping and tearing, the shame, the fear, the inadequacy, the unknown. These women will turn towards hormonal interventions for some escape. Be they hormonal contraceptives or testosterone, there is essentially the same intent behind them. These are the women who can't picture themselves alive in 5 years' time, their fear of life's aggressive vivacity so all-consuming. So how to countenance the possibility that life could come from you, grow in you, an unwitting host, against all your wishes? It is an abject loss of self-control for the many who often have little to speak of anyway, in their severe throes of trauma. To have no choice to live is enough of a burden to bear. And in severe trauma, as in autism, we see a lack of theory of mind. One is too busy surviving the re-traumatization inherent in each day to easily enter the head of the mother or another, a potential future she, who could value life, who could be safe enough, loved enough, strong enough, to do the most intensely terrifying of all things, to surrender one's body to the baseness of biology and have oneself marked out as mother.